Yo, what's up? All right, sunshine, blue skies here in South Texas. Really beautiful skies over here. Yep. It's kind of interesting how we're all over here huddling up and enjoying things. Well, I guess we're going to talk about what we always talk about, which is the criminals running the world have performed something extremely evil upon the human race, and they must all be sent to Guantanamo Bay. That's the inevitable final result. Not what I'm going to do, but what other more powerful people are going to be doing to all who were involved in the lockdown. Can't get rid of karma. Now, what's happening is that in 1913, Federal Reserve established, in the U.S. anyway, a central bank. And I won't go into all the details. But for over 100 years, a little bit more than 100 years now, 107 years, the central bank has been a criminal enterprise on the North American continent. And they have expanded the criminal enterprise to the world with the World International Monetary Fund, etc. But anyway, just two quick details how these banks operate. So they don't have any real money like gold or anything backing up all the world money or the dollars that's supposed to be the world money. What backs up the central banks, including the Federal Reserve mainly, and the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, whatever organizations, what backs those organizations up is debt. Not gold, but debt, which makes them all criminals. And so in order for them to raise a lot of money, there's only two ways to raise a lot of money and a lot of debt, and that is warfare, number one, and welfare, number two. So number one, which means extermination of human beings when warfare, or number two, debasing human beings in helplessness and despair, drug addiction, and addiction to the government for their livelihood. So there's, like I said, there's two ways those central banks create dollars, money, cash, or whatever. And it's been going on since 1913, mainly on at least the American level, and it was rolled out to the entire world around 1948-ish or something, the Bretton Woods sort of agreement where the dollar was taken over as the world currency. Back then it was backed by gold, but the plan was to get it completely off of gold so they could debase the currency and float it into a nothing currency based on debt. So that's it. If you're not on a gold standard, you're on a debt standard as far as money. Or should I say, if it's not tied down to a gold standard with specific weights of gold. Before we went off the gold standard, it was $35 an ounce was what the dollar was supposed to be. Now we're on a debt standard. Again, that's the way it is, and so therefore, since that time, you have a welfare and warfare. Started in 1913, and then they started devaluing the reserve slowly from 1913 to 1971, lowering the reserves from gold, which they were supposed to have, down to a very low percentage, and then they went completely off in 1971, I think it was. So a little bit of warfare and welfare from 1913 to 1971, and now it's all warfare and welfare for them to create money. So every dollar you have means somebody owes something in a loan. So in order for the money supply to even exist, there must be a loan. And the easiest way to get loans is warfare. And welfare. That's why human beings are debased with the welfare and debased with the warfare. It's a law of the universe. Whenever you don't back hard assets with the bills, it's fraudulent, and it works only so much until the entire world is caught up in it. Then it collapses into fire and sword and flame and who knows what. Big collapse. And that's what we're having here right now, is the collapse of the financial system, because up until about 2010 they could debase the currency with debt, like I said, welfare and warfare. However, what happened in like 2007 to 2009 was cryptocurrencies were invented, and then therefore a new currency that couldn't be inflated is now on the market, competing with the central banks, cartel, criminal gangs. And so they can't control the world anymore with their welfare warfare, extermination and debasement of human beings anymore. They've been caught. Everybody knows what they're up to. Well, some of us do. And everybody instinctively know what's going on, but those of us who are consciously digging into the details know what's going on, exactly what's going on, and exactly what has to happen to clean all the gangsters. The criminal gangsters has been running the world roughly since 1913 in the USA, and approximately 1948 worldwide. The criminal central banks with their currencies based on nothing except debt. So that's what we're going through here. It's a reset of the entire world economy because the central banks crashed and defaulted. The Chinese and the Russians kind of knew the game. Those living in the United States don't know the game very much because we're not educated on money in the United States at all. You pretty much have to start a business and get out there to learn about money, because our educational system is designed to make us into factory slaves that knew nothing about money. And so, like I said, the central banks are crashing and burning to the fucking ground. And when you see censorship on social media, that's because a lot of their investors that are connected to their ownership are in on the scam of the central banks. You know, like I said, warfare and welfare creates debt, and that's how you create money in a monetary system that doesn't have any gold backing it, or fractional reserve banking, where they only have a fraction of assets in the bank to back up the currency that's in circulation. So that's what's going on now. So we got probably about 2 to 5 years of reset, because a currency reset can't just happen immediately. It's very difficult. So it's going to take probably 2 to 5 years to reset the currency, because the all right, now we're back, I guess. I got a phone call coming in right as I was talking about all that stuff. So yeah, as the central banks crash and burn, because their entire system was based on debt, at least since 1971, kind of starting in 1913 and 1948. The system's got to go, because the Chinese and the Russians knew what was going on, and they was like, we're not taking any more of your U.S. money backed on nothing, back in February. And then the United States effectively defaulted in February. And then it took about a month for all that default to start trickling into the rest of the system, where we started feeling it. So now every government's out of money. Can't have any. Yeah, essentially there's no government. It looks like the USA might break up Not sure about that. Hopefully we can hold things together, but massive default, massive equivalent of the breakup of the Soviet Union back in 1989. So we have like crazy fucking times ahead of us. Armageddon. So yeah, that's what we're looking at here. And so us as individuals, we just stay healthy and strong. Just be able to roll with the changes. Don't get too stuck into institutions. Every institution's going to be wiped out, from government to money to education to religion, churches. Every religion, every established institution is going to be wiped out. And within about 6 years, it's not going to be the same. We're basically in the Battle of Armageddon. Everything's going to be reset to zero. If you ever watch the Fight Club movie where they were all trying to reset the system back to zero, that's essentially what's happening here. Now, we won't necessarily have, nothing like I guess there could be mass warfare if the gangsters from Wall Street recapture control for the purposes of creating more debt from warfare and welfare. Then they'll be encouraged to start more wars to create more money in the money supply. So you got to watch out for that. But if we keep the Wall Street gangsters from running the USA and we get back on the gold standard, the honest way to do banking, then we're in for a new 1,000 years of peace. And the banking system we have to implement is based on gold, on the old Byzantine Empire model that lasted for 400, 800 years. And they never went into debt, ever. So yeah, it's been done before and it can be done again. But yeah, you can't have any banking system on any national or worldwide level based on debt and not have warfare and welfare constantly, because that's the way that sort of banking system is set up. It can't operate any other way. So that's the main takeaways from this. The central banks have crashed. And number one, or should I say the two things they're based upon, because there's no gold backing the dollars or any other currency, the only two things that support it is warfare and welfare. And it's because it's based on debt. So every dollar out there in circulation is based on debt. Otherwise, there won't be any money whatsoever out there. Because we're not on the gold standard. So therefore, since 1913 and starting hot and heavy in 1948 to 1971, warfare and welfare has been a big part of the central banking system, because that's the only way to create large sums of money and based on debt. Again, because there is no gold standard, people have to die, i.e. in warfare, or get debased in welfare for this nasty, disgusting system to survive. Nasty and disgusting. So we're in the Battle of Armageddon here. The entire world's being reset. Like I said, we got 2 to 5 years for all this stuff to wash out. And we as individuals have to be very flexible, respond to change really fast, respond to market conditions really fast, because it's going to be pretty fucking wild. Pretty fucking wild. Nothing's going to be the same, at least on the monetary level. Pretty much all mortgages, I think there's almost $10 trillion of mortgages out there on the Fannie Mac and Freddie Mac sort of accounts, and all that's got to go away, because you can't have a gold standard based on that much debt. So that's got to go away. So if you have mortgages, that's all going to go away, because the central banks won't control anything anymore, and they're going to be wiped out of their assets. Has to be. In order to establish the gold standard, we have to wipe out all those debts. So some of it's not going to be too bad. If you own a house or a lot of real estate, you're probably going to get forgiven on a lot of that debt, because there's no way to sustain that debt anymore. Like I said, we had enough warfare and welfare since 1913, and the system has just expanded out from the Federal Reserve out to the World Bank to the International Monetary Fund, and now it's done. It's saturated. It's crashed. So all the gangsters on Wall Street They're probably going to have to go to Guantanamo Bay if they were involved in this massive warfare, welfare scheme since 1913. Coming hot and heavy in 1948 with the Bretton Woods Convention, and then really, really fully implemented in 1971 when we went off the gold standard. There's been warfare and welfare ever since. Those are the facts, guys. The gangsters on Wall Street have been fucking us over since 1913. All the world wars of the 20th century didn't have to happen. All the mass killings in World War I, mass killings in World War II never had to happen if we were on a gold standard. But that we had a central banks all over the place, that's why it happened. Because warfare and welfare is the two ways to raise debt. Otherwise, there won't be any money on a debt-based monetary system, which is the evil, wicked central bank system. That's why we got to go back to the gold standard. Save humanity, save everybody, save the world. And we got to reset here. Get back to gold, precious metals. Like I said earlier, the cryptocurrency was probably the main push that destroyed the system. Is because now with Bitcoin and the central banks don't know who's trading what in Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies, and they can't control it. So therefore, everybody started investing into this cryptocurrency and trade, which is equivalent to the gold standard. Because if you can't expand your currency, or you can't deface your currency or devalue your currency, is effectively a gold standard in all practical purposes. So essentially the cryptocurrencies destroyed the central banks finally, the nail in their coffin to wipe out those evil rascals. Kennedy, I think, tried to wipe them out back in the 60s, but he wasn't the level of leadership we needed. He was a Harvard Ivy League guy that didn't understand how the real world operated. And so looks like we probably have pretty good leadership now to maybe at least take it on, to wipe them out and reset the entire system into a new world of 1,000 years of peace on earth after the Battle of Armageddon, obviously, because the wicked guys gotta go away somehow. So in your personal spiritual warfare, what do? I think I mentioned this last week on the live stream, is that you got to be strong. And I think the most important thing for individuals is to remember who you are. You've been here before. Like I said about a week ago, you're an eternal being. You've been on this earth for millions, maybe thousands, whatever years. You've been here before. You fought in battles ages ago. Remember who the fuck you are, and know that you've been here before. And it's all going to be good after the Battle of Armageddon, because you know who you are. Your mission has been the same throughout the ages. You are an eternal being. You're not just a lifetime of 80 to 70 years on this planet. You've been around for millions of years. Every soul is eternal. Nobody dies spiritually. At least not as we think it happens. So you must keep the faith that you've been here before. You've seen all this before. You've probably lived lives before. You probably walked the earth with Jesus Christ, perhaps. Maybe. Fought in battles with the Caesars of Rome, perhaps. Who knows? You might have. You might have been a monk, a Buddhist monk in China a few thousand years ago. You might have been a monk in the Middle Ages and doing great spiritual practices. We need to remember who the fuck we are. And that's the secret, is to remember who the fuck you are. That you're an eternal being. You will never die, ever. And that's the hope here. And once we get that, relax, get out of the fear, stay completely out of the fucking fear. Fear is what the earthbound dark forces want you to get involved in. Fear. That's the killer. But if you stay out of fear, remember who the fuck you are, then you're good. Like I said, there's a lot of change coming up here. Let's see, kind of bright over here. That's the change coming on us. We're in the middle of it. Those of you who did not wake up back in 2012 and 2013, like I mentioned in the live stream last week, you're going to have some rough time because you got a lot of spiritual muscles that you haven't developed, and you have to develop them now, or you're going to have a very rough time surviving this era. Because if you're a materialist, you're addicted to carbohydrates, drugs, sex, masturbation, pornography, and all that bullshit, you're fucked. You have a long way to catch up. And if you didn't wake up in 2012 or 2013, you're going to have a shitty time here. Very shitty time. Everybody was waking up around then. The Spirit was waking us all up. Everybody around the world was waking up. And so you have to be strong, remembering who the fuck you were. And this too shall pass, and we shall win. That's the way it is. Let me give you some advice on some of you guys here that might be involved in what I kind of call traditional religions or strange religions. I'm just going to be straight up with you guys. Shit ain't going to work anymore. If you're devout to your religion, that's going away. The gods have awoken us up. The Spirit has awakened everybody, and that's all going to be wiped off the face of the earth. Because most religions are based on a combination of good and evil. And every last one of the institutional religions have been invaded by dark forces, and all the scriptures have been tampered with. Every Bible out there has been tampered with demons and demonic powers, and it's like there's some good stuff in there, but there's also some very wicked stuff in all the scriptures. So that's going to be wiped off the face of the earth, or exposed for what it is. All those dark passages in the so-called scriptures. This, like I said, is about 60% good and 30% garbage in most of the scriptures in the world. And like I said, if you woke up around 2012 or 13, you know this already. But if you haven't, then you're screwed, at least until you catch up. You gotta catch up. And there's no other way to catch up than to get quiet times to listen to your sixth sense out there. We only have 5 senses on the physical plane. And in order to contact the upper worlds, you have to get quiet so you can lower down the physical noise from all our 5 senses to where you can hear the 6th, 7th, and 8th sense coming up. That's how you got to do it. It's through a quiet time, very quiet time. Classical religious training of monks and holy men. Basically, you got to find a quiet spot and be quiet until you start hearing the voice. And it's not a physical voice. You see the sights and the sounds. It's not physical. You have to lower the volume of your physical senses so you can listen to the higher senses kicking in. There's no other way to do it. And with addictions, you can't hear it. So if you're addicted to any of those things I mentioned earlier, you can't hear the voice or the sounds that cannot be heard and the sights that cannot be seen, because the higher senses and the higher worlds are very subtle. They're quiet. They're subtle. And if you're addicted, your senses on the physical plane are burned out and numb, and you can't awaken up the higher senses with all that bullshit. And so that's what you got to do. You got to do the hard work. You got to do the work and get yourself strong and ready physically and spiritually. Tune into the real stuff instead of the entertainment. On the physical level, you got to be quiet, very quiet. You can't hear the sound of the Spirit in noise. Like literally, you can't hear it at all in noise. Because again, in order to hear the higher senses, you must have quiet on the physical side of things. Basic, like I said, basic spiritual training of monks and holy men throughout the ages. But us as individuals now have to do that because there are no more spiritual leaders on the planet. Most of them are wicked and suffering from their own addictions. And you can't be a spiritual leader with addictions. And that goes for food addictions, drug, alcohol, sex, drugs, masturbation, pornography, all that shit. You can't be addicted to anything and be a spiritual leader. This doesn't work. You're a fool if you think you can. All you're doing is debasing your audience and putting your darkness into your audience if you have any of that shit going on in your life. If you think yourself a spiritual leader. Yep, that's what happens. The darkness gets in you, and you're an addicted person, and it goes out into the world, and you're influenced. So as you influence people, if you think you're a spiritual leader, if you have all those addictions, you're passing them on to your audience, and basically making the world a darker place. Because with great spiritual power comes great responsibility, and bad karma is always going to bounce back at you. It always does. So yeah, so there's some fun, interesting times here. What else can we talk about? Yeah, exercise. So yeah, in this Battle of Armageddon thing, if you're middle age, you probably know the basics. You can't, you got to be good, very good exercise, very good diet, because as we get to middle age to old age, you have less tolerance for bad food. If you're in your 20s or 30s, you don't have to worry much. You get to your late 30s, you got to start paying attention to your health. Make sure you probably have no processed foods and the carbohydrate bullshit in your diets. Most of you are going to need a meat diet, pretty much meat and fat. Some people can get away with a vegetarian diet, but it's very few. You got to have the proper body genetics to get away with the vegetarian stuff, so I say stay away from that unless you really know what the fuck you're doing. But for the most part, you just need a meat and fat diet, and that's it. Stay away from carbohydrates and sugars. And that, of course, affects your spirituality, because if you know a lot of holy men, or supposedly holy men, you just look at their face. If you can tell they have an unhealthy diet, you can tell that they're, again, channeling that darkness into their audience, eating way too much carbohydrates, unhealthy foods, no exercise. That becomes part of your aura, your influence. So you gotta make sure you're pretty clean, and kind of tamp down the alcohol as you get towards middle age. You can tolerate a lot more when you're young, but you need to tamp it down the older you get, and that's all an individual sort of thing on the alcohol. Most religious traditions call drunkenness a sin. That's pretty much spot on. So you drink to elevation, but you don't drink to drunkenness. And then, like I said, as you get older, you learn that you can tolerate less and less of it. So yeah, it's an instrument used to silence the conscious mind, because a lot of us moderns are all stuck in our heads, because we have to, that's the kind of work we do nowadays, right? And so sometimes the alcohol kind of turns down the volume on the conscious mind to where you could awaken some of the other levels of consciousness as a kind of a band-aid sort of thing, right? Sometimes. But yeah, that's of course you got to be careful with alcohol if you have abusive issues in your family, because some families have darkness in their bloodline that goes into the alcohol thing. And even if you get rid of the alcohol, it's going to pop up somewhere else if you don't do your spiritual work. That's just the way it's the way the world operates. So yeah, what else can we talk about in the Battle of Armageddon here? Well, we talk about central bank spirituality. Remember who the fuck you are. The social media censors are basically in cahoots with the central banks, because the central banks are required to do warfare and welfare to finance their debt and create money. What else can we talk about? Yeah, how do you make money in some weird shit like this? Huh? Create value. You got to find your customers, make them as happy as possible, make them want to do business with you, and that's it. Find out your ideal customer. If you're in business or you're trying to make some money, find out your ideal customer and try to figure out creative ways to jazz up their world and make them so goddamn happy that they won't want to do business with anybody else except you. That's how you make money. And roughly speaking, that's how you make money. Because I know how to make money. And so, I need to make sure everybody knows how to make money now. Yeah, I've made the millions, so at least those of you who made more like billions and stuff, you can tell people more than I know. But yeah, I can pull in the millions. So that's my qualifications for making money. So, what the fuck is all this? I hate sirens because in my world there's no such thing as emergencies. Emergencies don't exist because emergencies are fake. All right, I got to start running, guys. Get my heart rate up, and so I'll talk to you guys later. Be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Stay away from fear. Till next time, Joe East. Out of here.